about. She joins us with the full forecast later tonight. I'm Chris Ensing. Thanks for joining us. The province in the second wave of this pandemic. Here in Windsor, we're still seeing single-digit days. Some of those are agricultural workers. The Red Cross no longer operating the migrant isolation center here in Windsor. That contract ended yesterday. The CBC's Tamina Aziz live outside the former isolation center. Tamina, what happens if workers need to be isolated now? Oh, looks like we've got a little bit of technical difficulties there. We'll try and see if we can get back to Tamina in just a moment. Continuing on, though, we want to talk about an increase in demand for COVID-19 testing that's led to a change in location for an assessment center in Chatham, Kent. Starting Monday, that center at CK Health Alliance will move to the St. Clair College Healthplex on Grand Avenue West. The new location, more space for testing and parking as well. Anyone looking for a test, you're asked to book an appointment online. Walk-in times, they're going to vary depending on the volume. A pay increase to personal support workers in Ontario. That's the latest plank in the government's fall plan for COVID-19. But a union representing those workers disappointed because the increase will only last until March. Lorenda Redikoff has more.
We're making a landmark investment of $461 million to help stabilize our PSW workforce.
It's an extra $3 an hour for most personal support workers on the front lines during this pandemic. $2 an hour more for those working in hospitals, where pay is already higher. And just like the pandemic pay that ran out in mid-August, it's temporary, only until the end of March, at least so far.
When it comes around to March, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure this is full-time. They deserve it. They're hard-working folks, and I have your backs.
A union for PSWs says this should already be permanent.
How can you value personal support workers for 5 months at a time? And they are actually feeling quite insulted about that they are valued when their life's at risk, but not every day of their lives.
It needs to be permanent. It needs to be a permanent increase in the pay that these folks are getting. They need to be guaranteed full-time jobs.
This comes as seniors are making up a larger percentage of new cases. In today's numbers, 25 are aged 80 and up, and 42 long-term care homes are now dealing with an outbreak.
Community transmission is wildly out of control right now. The greatest risk factor for whether a home's going to go into outbreak is the community prevalence of COVID-19. If we can't get the community prevalence under control, we're going to see more outbreaks and we're going to see more deaths.
And he says the huge backlog on processing tests is only adding to the problem.
There's a lot of positive cases that are waiting to be reported. And not only that, they're waiting to be contact traced as well. And they're often the community spreading COVID-19. So, it's an extremely alarming situation.
He says the test positivity rate for seniors is rising, along with hospitalizations. Lorenda Redikoff, CBC News, Toronto.
We've got our Tamina Aziz back now. She's standing out in front of what at one point was that recovery and isolation center in Windsor for migrant workers that had tested positive for COVID-19. But today is when that contract wraps up. There's calls for federal funding to keep it going. What happens if workers need to be isolated now, though, Tamina?
Chris, right now there are currently dozens of temporary foreign workers that are in isolation accommodations elsewhere, but many, including the city, are currently waiting to hear back from the government. The city of Windsor has agreed to support an isolation and recovery center as long as the federal government provides funding for the operation. But they aren't saying where these foreign workers are currently being housed. The city says they couldn't, in good conscience, move these workers from this center and move them to another isolation center or another accommodation within the 14-day window. I spoke to a representative from the Ontario Greenhouse Vegetable Growers. She says that the center is critical to mitigate and control the impact of a potential second wave.
I think it's important that we have the resources in place regionally to respond to anything that might arise in the upcoming months. And I think it'll be really critical that we all work together with our regional partners as well as healthcare to ensure those resources are in place. And those resources include isolation, obviously, but they're not just for the agri-food employees. They're also for vulnerable populations that can't effectively isolate themselves.
She says even though these seasonal workers are currently being scheduled to return back to their home country, a new group of workers will be returning in the new year, so this center will be needed.
Now, Tamina, if there is an influx of people who need to be isolated, will the hotel become an isolation center again?
Chris, the city says that nothing is concrete, but after speaking to the federal government, they say that funding is promising. MP Brian Massey has also called on the federal government for some financial backing.
The federal government actually allows and authorizes migrant workers to come into our country. So we have a responsibility, not only just to them as individuals, but also the country they're coming from, to ensure that their conditions are safe and secure. And that's actually a responsibility of the federal government. The city is stepping forward, actually is really impressive, because really it's a federal responsibility, because we need the workers for our economy. But at the same time, we also need them to be safe and secure for our community. And that's a great balance to have. And it's something we should actually encourage to be proactive rather than reactive when problems actually come later when people are sick.
We reached out to the federal government, but they could not immediately respond. Chris.
Thanks, Tamina. The CBC's Tamina Aziz live tonight. Soon, public transit users will once again have to pay for rides here in Windsor. CBC's Jacob Barker now with what Transit Windsor users think about that move.
Getting on the bus may have felt a bit backwards to riders over the past few months. Loading through the back door kept the driver safe, but a change is coming. Transit Windsor is in the midst of installing new barriers.
That will assist the driver in keeping them protected from passengers that are boarding. Passengers will still be able to come on board, use the fare box, and then proceed back.
That's right. Along with the reintroduction of the front door will also come the reintroduction of fares.
We are encouraging riders to go now to the terminal to reload their smart cards, purchase tickets, and be ready for October the 19th.
So with rear door loading, passengers were limited to the back half of the bus. You can see that a piece of caution tape limited them from going into the front of the bus, but now that they can get on the front, that half of the bus is opening back up.
Delmore says other municipalities have already returned to front door loading as the province enters the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. He says this measure increases safety for the passengers getting on and off the bus.
Currently, right now, passengers are boarding and exiting at the same time at the rear door. By coming to rear door, we are providing a one-way traffic flow. So there are some additional safety measures that are actually being put in place.
Transit riders say they don't mind the changes or that fares are returning.
Well, it's cheaper than a cab. It's cheaper than walking. That's all you can say, right?
It's unfortunate, but it's whatever. Yeah, we did it before, we can do it again.
The city did shut down the service at the beginning of the pandemic and say even now ridership is down and may take years to recover. But they say with protective measures in place, they hope the service can continue despite what may come through this second wave. Jacob Barker, CBC News, Windsor.
In early September, OPP were investigating a complaint against animal cruelty. The report then alleged that kittens were thrown out of a moving vehicle in Essex. Police say that they found and interviewed the driver, determined that the kittens were not thrown from the vehicle, but fell from its undercarriage. 3 people were taken to hospital this afternoon after cars collided in downtown Windsor. There were 3 vehicles that collided around 1 this afternoon. This is at Olette and Wyandotte. Police say one of the cars careened off the road, struck 2 people who were in motorized scooters. Both were taken to hospital along with one of the drivers of the vehicles. The other drivers not injured. Police have just reopened the intersection now, still investigating the cause. None of the injuries are considered life-threatening. Detroit is tearing down a building in the Eastern Market along with a Windsor artist's mural, but there's an interesting plan to preserve the 3-year-old piece.
The wall will no longer exist after the building's torn down, but they've 3D scanned the entire building. They've 3D scanned the entire building, and from that scan, this company will make a glass structure with that relief of the brickwork of that building. So even with no imagery on it, it would look like kind of like a ghost of that building around whatever building they're building inside of it. But then within that glass is the print of, it's like a translucent print of my mural.
It's going to look something like this. Bombardier says he's been working with the Detroit artist on the project and the building's owners as well. The new building expected to be constructed sometime next year, and it will be only 3 of its kind in the U.S. A new book is shedding light on the origin stories of real-life superheroes to see what drives them to put on those capes and masks. Now, one of those superheroes is from right here in Windsor. As the CBC's Sanjay Maru reports, their mission isn't just about fighting crime, but about providing a helping hand.
People can't help but take notice.
Hey, how's it going today? Pretty good.
But Mark Sewell welcomes the attention. His persona? Canadian Justice. The mask, the body armor, the walking stick, all defining features of this hero's costume, but it's not for defending himself from bad guys and their good punches. Rather, it's about doing a good deed.
When people see someone just helping the homeless, but they're dressed in their normal clothes, they blend into the background as well. People continue to ignore the issue. Whereas when you have a bunch of people all with crazy outfits, people look. And if they look, then they tend to see what's going on.
Part of a small group launched 8 years ago, the Trillium Guards of Ontario, Sewell hands out food, water, and clothing to people who are homeless. In fact, he'll be donning his costume for another do-good mission in Windsor this weekend.
We're actually calling this Operation New Normal. It used to be we'd bring all these rolling suitcases, stuff, everyone would gather around and, it's like, well, do you need this? Okay, do you like this color better? That's not going to work. So it's going to be, we've figured it out. We're going to be able to do it in a socially distanced and safe manner.
The origin story of these superhero groups, the subject of a new book. And its author says real-life superheroes are more common than most people think.
Some of them, this is a personal thing for them. This is a personal, almost sort of therapy or effort at transformation. Again, superheroes are these sort of symbols of virtue in our culture. And so a lot of these people create this superheroic persona that they want to live up to.
Hello, how are you doing today? It is getting cold.
And when these superheroes aren't handing out supplies to those in need, they keep a watchful eye on the people around them.
In Windsor, there was one woman that some guy had slammed her up against a shed. I just heard the noise and I ran over there, and the guy, he starts running out and just sees me there, and he's like, oh yeah, no problem, and gets out of there.
The lesson of that incident and all the other times he's been there for someone in need.
Really? I just had to be there. Just be there.
Sanjay Maru, CBC News, Windsor.
Now, today marks the 70th anniversary of CBC Windsor Radio. Technology certainly changed. Our hosts have as well. We dug into our CBC archives and found a story about the 45th anniversary. If you're doing the math, that's back in 1995. It's brought to you by then CBC reporter Percy Hatfield.
Dwight Smith.
Morning show host Paul Vasey had a national sports guy in the big studio this morning, and a weather guy, and dozens of listeners.
And Andy Campbell is back here.
Today's show was quite different from their first official radio broadcast 45 years ago. The equipment has changed over the years as well. Today's control rooms are much superior.
The first equipment we used was very, very crude.
Peter Drury should know he's been working around the radio studios since 1968 and remembers the original console,
which had tubes in it. And it got so hot you couldn't put records on top of it because they'd start to melt and warp.
Beth Heber knows all about records. She's been the music librarian for 27 years.
Listen, Percy. See, that's age.
No more 3x5 card files, so her work is a lot easier.
Now you put everything into the computer and you can do maybe 8 to 10 in an hour, where it used to take me 8 to 10 to do a day.
When the radio station signed on, Rod Clark was there and remembers it well.
The CBC, I have to admit now, was a little bit stuffy at the time.
I'm Ken Lang with the CBC.
Ken Lang has been around since '72. His role has changed. He's more into journalism now than classical music, blues, and jazz.
We were all kind of specialists and treated as such. Now you have to be more of a generalist. And I do miss hosting music shows.
The hosts have changed, the programs too, but there is still a connection to the original show. Rod Clark's daughter, Charlotte Schmitz, is now a radio news reporter.
I'm very proud that she is doing that work, and I think she does a good job.
A lot of anniversaries with CBC Windsor. I started working at the radio station here in 1975. I was married that year as well. My own 20th wedding anniversary is coming up. I've been thinking what to get Gail, and I found it this morning, honey. Here it is, your own Paul Vasey Morning Watch fridge magnet. Percy Hatfield, CBC News, Windsor.
I think there's still a couple of those magnets kicking around in the office today. We have a bit of a chance of thunderstorms and rain on the way. Colette Kennedy is going to break it all down for us next. The Quebec government is apologizing to the family of an Indigenous woman over her treatment in a hospital in Joliet. As Joyce Echouan lay dying on Monday, she posted live video from her bed. She was pleading for help and was insulted and ridiculed by a nurse. Echouan's death has triggered widespread outrage, and as CBC's Sudha Krishnan tells us, the province says it's taking action, but now other complaints are surfacing.
The rallying cries, the heartbreak and the frustration.
Is it going to be the same story again? Or tomorrow?
or next week. When it's gonna end?
Many who saw Joyce Echaquan's plea for help are angry and sadly are not surprised.
Il y a 2 ans, j'ai déposé une plainte à l'hôpital de Joliette.
Echaquan's friend, Alexia Nequado, says she was admitted to hospital 2 years ago for stomach pain. She says she was administered morphine despite her bracelet warning she was allergic. She passed out.
Elle m'a dit que c'était idiot de ma part.
When she came to, Nequado says the nurse called her an idiot for not warning her. She filed a complaint but never heard back.
I heard many times people from the community saying that they were mistreated in the institution.
The Grand Chief of the Atikamekw First Nation says several patients have tried to be transferred to other hospitals with better care.
Comme toute la population, on a été très choqués.
Meanwhile, the head of the local health authority says he was shocked to see the video and that staff were shaken. He says it has worked with the community interpreters and trained its staff.
C'est pas allé assez loin.
He's promising the hospital will do more.
She hasn't done the work that she was to do in the last year.
The provincial opposition is calling on the Indigenous Affairs Minister to step down. Sylvie Damour has apologized to Echaquan's family and to the community. But many are tired of words, and some believe there's a reason Echaquan used her phone.
She knew already that something was going to happen.
And something that now has pushed many to say things have to change. So the Christian CBC News, Montreal.
The federal government is pouring billions of dollars into infrastructure projects. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says it's part of an effort to fuel the economy and keep Canadians working during the pandemic.
Through the Canada Infrastructure Bank, this 3-year growth plan will invest in everything from clean power, zero-emission buses and home retrofits to broadband and irrigation infrastructure for farmers. This is a win-win. With smart, targeted investments, we can get people back on the job and grow the economy while building a healthy, sustainable future for everyone.
That plan is going to cost $10 billion. Trudeau says it will create about 60,000 jobs. Join us now for a live look at the weather. Is Colette Kennedy. There were some concerning clouds above, but they've seemed to sort of shifted away from at least the riverfront here. But it's kind of looking a little, it was looking a little dark there for a while.
Yeah, you know, this is the kind of pattern where it's all kind of in the luck of your location, Chris. Because if you're in one part of the area, you just get sunshine and you hear about these showers, and I'm telling you, keep an umbrella, and you're like, what is she talking about? Because you know, you can have a fair weather day and everything, or at least you get some clouds, but that's about the size of it, and never see any wet conditions. But nearby, a heavy thunderstorm has rolled through, and that's sort of what's happened. So our temperature was up to around 17 degrees, and then sure enough, a thunderstorm went right by the reporting station anyway, dropped that reading back to 13. Elsewhere, as you say, you're still finding things aren't so bad, right? And these are the kinds of conditions. You see it on the radar. There are areas where there's still fair weather, but just skirting around are some of the showers and some of the thunderstorms. And in fact, I say thunderstorms and put the lightning strikes on here so you can have that verified and see that there are lightning strikes. A lot of it going out over the lake. And as well, we've seen the conditions right for some water spouts and had lots of sightings of some of these water spouts. Not a problem unless you happen to be on the waters in terms of these, so not dangerous in any other respect. So the instability is here, but now the cold front, and this is that shot of much cooler air that I've been kind of talking about all week, how this was going to be moving in. So that's going to be coming through. Unfortunately, sometimes when you get a cold front going through, you know, it carves everything out, clears everything. This is not the sort of case. The cold front's going to go through, but in its wake, there's still going to be a trough that leaves some instability behind. So we'll see some of this active weather moving away from us. We should get some clearing tomorrow in the morning hours and into the afternoon. For the Windsor, Leamington area, I think we'll have a lesser chance of seeing some of the showers tomorrow afternoon. Unfortunately, a little bit further east, there'll be a greater chance and enhancement of getting into still a repeat of showers and thunderstorms. But look at the cooler air as the front goes through tonight. I'm not kidding. Look at some of these overnight lows. 3, 5 for the overnight lows. That takes some getting used to tomorrow morning. You're going to need an extra layer you haven't needed for the last few mornings. And tomorrow afternoon, this is about the size of it. I put 30 to 60. I know that's a range. The 30 is the Windsor-Leamington area for the chance for showers tomorrow afternoon. The 60 is further east. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about it. Temperatures, they do warm up again. It's going to take to about Tuesday before we're going to see that push.
I tell you, hey, those dips, but you know, I guess it's part of the deal, right? We had a nice last week of summer. That first week of fall was great, so we'll just deal with the rest.
Yeah, maybe by Thanksgiving, things will be looking good again.
That's perfect. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Now, Sanjay showed you some local superheroes. Up next, a daredevil of sorts. The federal government has reintroduced a bill to end so-called conversion therapy, ending the practice which tries to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. Was part of the Liberals' election platform. The earlier proposed legislation died when Parliament was prorogued. The Minister of Justice says conversion therapy has been widely discredited as ineffective and can also be mentally and emotionally harmful.
It has no basis in science or in healthcare practices. Too many Canadians have undergone conversion therapy and have had to live with its harmful effects. That's why our government today is stepping up to do our part to make sure that no one else has to face this devastating practice.
He hopes the legislation will be supported by all members of Parliament. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole has indicated that his party favors it. It was a feat that was a little bit Spider-Man, a little bit Elvis, and a passing nod to Roy Rogers. That there is climber Hélène Robert of France, dressed up like a Vegas act, scaling a 32-story skyscraper in Germany. He did it without a harness, firefighters watching from below, an ambulance, passerbys all watching as the 58-year-old trying to climb that. Now, he has more than 100 climbs under his heels, including San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge and the world's tallest building in Dubai. It's 6:29 p.m. and that's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. Power and Politics is up next. We're going to join that already in progress. Thanks for watching. Have yourselves a wonderful evening.